Perfect. Well, hello everyone. My name is Frank Thomas Epitropoulos, and I'm calling you now from beautiful Hualien, Taiwan, from the comfort of a homestay. And Doug had asked me to speak about what I've been up to in the last 13 months from having a career in Phoenix and making the decision to travel the world and to take a life sabbatical for myself. And probably the best way to start on this whole, to give everything into context, is that probably one of the most formative memories that I have is that inspired me to travel in the first place was back in 2004 when my father took me out of two-a-day football practices in middle school to go to our ancestral homeland of Greece to go to Athens for the 2004 Olympics. And on this trip, it made me realize that this had more of a profound effect on how I perceive the world, on how I see myself operating in this world is not only being in a place of our ancestral homeland, but also seeing all of the nations of the world descending for an athletic event where the first time sitting down in a little cafe in the Plaka, the main market square of Athens, and sitting down with two athletic attaches from the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. And from that moment, I knew that the world was a lot bigger than where I was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. And from there, I just knew at some point I have to keep going onward and outward. Something as small a step as moving out of Columbus, Ohio to go to the University of Cincinnati, about a 2-hour drive away, and going to the University of Cincinnati and taking on internships in Manhattan, San Francisco, and studying abroad in France during my collegiate tenure lay the groundwork for me just keep moving and progressing and seeing how far I can go. Then, all the while getting my experiences, I started a media career with Sinclair Broadcast Group in Columbus as a marketing consultant and advertising salesman. That progressed into Cincinnati in the same similar role, but at a bigger station in a bigger market. And then, so a little bit of guts and goodwill, I found myself living and working in Phoenix, Arizona at Fox 19 with the Fox Corporation, and even one of the large top 10 markets in the country. So I just keep wanting to get into bigger and better things because as ambitious as I am of seeing the world, but I still wanted to make a mark of myself professionally and just keep going into bigger places really suited my needs. And the biggest modus operandi for me is making money, as much money as possible, to fund my travels, going to Israel, China, Indonesia the first time back in 2018 before Bali blew up the way we knew it. And all the while, I kept thinking that I'm still working and looking outside. I wanted to see that there's still a world and it's kind of passing me by a little bit. So as soon as I started my job in Fox, within 6 months, the pandemic happens. And we all know how that happened, all know what happened to all of our lives, working from home, shutting in, and really putting a damper down on the very thing that motivates me to work has been essentially taken away from me. So if I can't travel, then what is the use for me to make money in the first place? But as a professional, I put my nose to the grindstone and I just kept pounding away and making the most of what I had. Then from 2020, having turnover at our work, the markets being what they were, and slowly creeping on burnout with my job, even though I loved doing what I did. Soon it became, with using the proverbial car, it's imagine putting your foot on the gas pedal, but you've been remaining in neutral the entire time. And from that, you really start seeing that you become closer to hitting burnout. Then, to bring this into much more personally, then in 2021, my mother, who had multiple sclerosis for 20 some years, she passes away. And spending 2022 and 23 still working and pouring myself into work and finding out that later that the job alone would not be able to make myself feel better or get me past a certain amount of personal ambitions. And it was really hard to leave Fox because, one, having great managers, having a great team. They were all supportive. And in spite of all that, I finally came to the realization in January of 2024, last year, after coming back from Vancouver, that it was just my time to go. That no matter how much money I was making or how professionally expedient I was becoming with progressing in my career, I knew that if I had stayed any longer, something in me was just to say that it's not going to end well. And get out now while I still have the wherewithal to see the world while I'm still without many responsibilities relative, no pets, no debt, no real overhead. I can leave a lease on a rented apartment. I can put my car away if I needed to, thankfully having good friends. And from that time, I decided on one cold night in Colorado in a cabin, I put myself away and I started writing down notes of all the places that I wanted to start seeing that were as far away from America as that I could imagine, because we know that in America, we usually only get about 2 weeks paid vacation a year. And to make up for lost time, I calculated taking about 4 to 5 months in Southeast Asia and in Nepal, India, Sri Lanka, and that would satisfy me. Packed up all my things, put it into storage, put my car away, start doing the research on how much everything was going to cost in each location I was going to go to. And once I laid out a solid framework for making it economically feasible, it gave me the confidence to put a pause on my professional career and just fly from LAX to Manila, Philippines, and I was off running. There's been moments where I thought that maybe I was making a bad mistake, that I had a really good thing, and I was thinking that I was throwing my entire career away. But as soon as I landed in the Philippines, within 3 days, I remember that I have the confidence that there's always going to be a professional career. Money comes and goes, and I can land on my feet. I have the confidence in myself that everything is going to be fine and everything's going to be okay as long as I trust the process and take care of my own personal well-being and get myself right. And the right opportunities will present themselves once I feel like I'm ready to get back into a professional career. So one thing I was going to show is how I mapped out this entire trip. So, yeah. For instance, one of the websites that I used quite extensively is budgetyourtrip.com, and this became kind of like the Rosetta Stone slash Dead Sea Scrolls for laying out the framework of this trip. Say, for instance, plugging in Amsterdam, you just put it in, and you can start scrolling down, and it comes down, you can boil it down to 3 different costs: meals per night, local transportation, and hotels or accommodations per night. What this ended up being translated to, excuse me, is this monstrosity of a spreadsheet. Figuring out a thorough way, and the reason this looks the way for Europe is originally when I said I was only going to be in Southeast Asia and India, I had to put a pause on India, Nepal, and Sri Lanka because by the time I would get there, it turns out to be the rainy season. So the trip ended up becoming extended by about 3 months to go someplace where I'd already had the appropriate clothing and materials, and go someplace that I can enjoy good weather and also see countries that I've never been to before in between Amsterdam and Turkey, because I found out that the most cost-effective way to get back to Nepal was from Istanbul. So if I knew where Z was, then working myself 90 days back. So from using Budget My Trip, you can see from Amsterdam, there's on this formula sheet that I created, hostel cost per nights, food cost per night, and transportation. The reason everything is here in green is those are ended up being confirmed costs, which what I showed from budgeting my trip, that those were projected costs, and it became more how far down below my budget can I see myself taking this. So getting the most out of the money that I had available. And the way I figured out this entire trip, at least for Europe, I started snaking my way through Europe from Amsterdam to Germany, Czech Republic, Austria, Slovakia, then from Slovakia to Hungary, taking a quick detour down to Greece to see my father in August, back to Hungary, then all of the Balkans, Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, and really don't like how this thing's. Sorry, I can't figure out how to hide the bar at the top of what I'm trying to show. But in any case, going down from all of the Balkans to Turkey, then into flying into, there we are. That's better. Sorry, recharting it. All of the Balkans, Romania, Bulgaria, then Turkey, then flying all the way from, no, wrong one. Istanbul to Kathmandu, Nepal, India, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Austria, New Zealand, Philippines, and now Taiwan. And at a certain point, I started extending this trip out from 9 months. Why not just round out to a full year? And there have been many experiences along the way here that really showed me like the best of humanity, the worst of humanity. Probably one of the best examples I can think of off the top of my head was back in October in India, in Jaipur. And doing this trip completely solo, eventually you're gonna hit some road snags. I'm trying to get to my bus from one location to the next. And even though on the map it says this is a bus terminal, it looks more attuned like the bazaars of Marrakesh. It is just a complete and utter, somehow organized, chaotic mess. And even though I arrived about an hour early, I couldn't find my bus because nothing was written in English, to the point where the time was coming, I was missing my bus, couldn't even find it, and here I am stranded with no recourse, no data on my phone. I have a 45-pound backpack on my bag and a 10-pound side bag, completely lost and just completely exposed. Thankfully, I found that there was 3 men who could barely even put together 2 or 3 words of English. Came over and asked, and were trying to ascertain what had made me so upset that I had missed my bus. And through the grace of God and goodwill, he was able to just ask me to get onto his motorbike with him. And trusting this man, he takes me to another bus station and converses with the owner, and he puts me on the next available bus, which shows that no matter where you come from, there's always going to be people that are going to want to help you along the way, and always do your best to pay it forward at some time in the future, which I had the good fortune of doing about a month later in Sri Lanka, when some 20-year-old girl was lost and she didn't really know what to do. She was separated from her friends because she was trying to meet them. I had taken time out of my day to use whatever resources I had to help put her back on the right track. And thankfully, at this time, I had known Sri Lanka pretty fairly well. Another one was, let's see here. Life is pretty strange when you start meeting people in every country. Getting introduced to a woman that we stayed in touch for at least for 9 months. And by the time I found myself back in Indonesia, I got invited to a wedding in Bali. And with a full regalia, turban, sarong, and experiencing the wedding unlike anything I've ever seen before in my life. And another one is back at the start in the Philippines, where I got to meet one of my future best friends, an amazing Australian he works in the mines out of Western Australia. We bonded in the Philippines last in March of 24. We stayed in touch for the entire year, and by the time I got to Australia, he took me out to a 5-day, 4-night music festival for New Year's. And Then when I was figuring out what I was going to do in Australia, he let me stay at his place rent free for about 2 to 3 weeks entire time, not asking for anything more than just good friendship and occasionally cooking a meal for him or two, which thankfully I love to cook. Stumbling onto another one of back in the Balkans, stumbling onto the Sarajevo Film Festival, which as a music fan, as a movie fan, going to a movie festival where the arts are descending upon everyone here. I'm sorry. Lost my train of thought. I'm just really excited because there's about 200 to 300 experiences I've had in deciphering which ones are best. It's kind of hard to say. It's like asking your favorite child. You don't really know which one at least the ones you don't want to admit. Going to the Australian Open with my father and experiencing a renewal of faith in the Balkans because I'm Greek Orthodox Christian, and going into Montenegro, Bulgaria, Romania, Serbia, where Orthodox Christianity is the predominant Christian faith. And every Sunday, I finally went back to church for the first time systematically, taking communion and finding out the little different rituals between Bulgarian Orthodox, Serbian Orthodox, and even Greek Orthodox with my namesake. And having to make adjustments along the way, such as losing my wallet between Istanbul and Nepal, between the mess of leaving my hostel, getting on the first transit, getting on the train and taking me to the airport, going through turnstiles. I had lost my wallet that had my driver's license, 2 credit cards, and my debit card. Sorry, my bank card for me to pull out cash. All I had on me was my passport and my one main credit card that somehow was not in my wallet because I was using it to tap on turnstiles. And knowing that I'm already about to board my plane, knowing that I only have one means of making cash or pulling out cash and paying for myself, putting myself down and coordinating with my banks to send replacement cards to Nepal, of all places, which is kind of a struggle. Then arriving in Nepal and getting stuck in there for 4 days because of heavy rains and monsoons, where it had gotten so flooded that the roads were completely closed down. The only way for me to get from location to location was to take 25-minute flights, which would have been a 12 to 24-hour bus ride. One of the most miserable experiences ever, but you get through them and you survive. And as I mentioned before, with seeing the best of humanity is people are doing the best of what they can with what they have available. You see the slums of Bombay, you see people's living conditions in Indonesia, or even in Cambodia. And this is probably one of the best examples of people making the best. Is out of all the countries of Indonesia, Cambodia really left a mark on me because knowing U.S. history's involvement in that region between Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, we bombed them back into the Stone Age, and then it allowed for a man with Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot to take over and annihilate in a genocide 4 million of their own citizens. Their economy is in ruin. Even to this day, they're still rebuilding, and yet every Cambodian that I met and interacted with has such a positive attitude. They just want to get on with their lives. They're finding happiness in a place where it allows for despair to set in pretty quickly. And it was pretty inspiring to see people with such great attitudes despite their circumstances. The same can also be said for Laos, which, that being the poorest country in Southeast Asia. Even when you have very little, you still have so much to give in your heart. And then juxtaposing that with the opulence of Singapore, which speaks to my experiences of living and working in New York City, that you can go from the range of one of the most advanced places in the world to some place to say Jaisalmer in India, where it is 125 degrees out in the desert, and you're watching people killing just live chickens right in front of you. it can really swing both ways. You can also see some of the lesser qualities of people, despite having people that are friendly, they'll offer you a place to stay. But you also can see people that travel the world and they go there for nefarious reasons. Thailand sticks out that my reasons for going was because I've never been and I wanted to just experience the country. They say in Thailand, you're either trying to find something or you're trying to run for something. And most of the tourists you find in Thailand these days, it's they're running from either responsibilities or they're running from either the law or they're just trying to figure themselves out, mostly at the end of a bottle or picking up drugs. But thankfully, that's not my thing. And oh, here's a good one. Having the unique perspective of being in 32 different countries has given me the perspectives of the perceptions of America from 32 different touch points. I remember when I was in Amsterdam and one of my friends from America who happened to be there at the same time, we went to just one of the many bars of Amsterdam, and they're playing on the big screen like it's an Arsenal Manchester United soccer football match. They're playing the Biden Trump debate from back in June. It was happening live, and they were watching it live as if it was a sporting event. And it gave me, and I could see the reactions from other tourists, from the Dutch. Even after the debate, some Dutchmen were coming up and asking me about, what I thought about the debate as an American, and then being in India during the lead up to the actual election day, and seeing different states' medias in Australia, in Serbia, or even in Nepal, Sri Lanka, of them covering U.S. affairs or covering President Biden, President Trump's administration, and you really start getting this composite view of how America is positioned in the world, and you can't really see the forest through the trees when you're inside America. You only can see how we have a lot of division between Republicans and Democrats. Thankfully, as an independent, I can take my step back and look at things more objectively, or as objective as one can. And you see people that are very pro America, people that are very anti America, or not so much anti America. It's in a highly reductive sense. You get the sentiment is we are either indifferent to America or we only do business where we tolerate America because they have bombs and our economy is dependent on them, which is it's cynical, but it's honest. But coming from a place of business, as long as you can find economic growth and you can find a way to create shared prosperity, everyone wins in the end. As long as you're mindful of cultures and mindful of the others' differences. Another one is outside of looking things through a economic and from a political lens, even also from my personal life. Being a single man, I also thought it would be a fun experiment to travel to go on at least one date in every country and see what the dating life is like in what people face in, say, Serbia, Bosnia, or even in Germany. I've gotten a a wide range of dating expectations, relationship expectations from all these countries, and I've learned something about myself, and with every person I've met on a date or at parties, bars, staying in people's houses, I've gotten to learn more about myself and creating a better sense of self-awareness on top of what I'd already had. Where now I have a better sense of knowing that I'm ambitious. I want to do something really great in this world. I really want to make my mark, make a legacy. And I'm still trying to figure out the best way to go about doing that. And hopefully by the end of this trip, which will be in about 2 months, when I go from here to Singapore, then to Hong Kong, and then to Japan. And then right now it looks like I'll be back in America by June. So yeah, at this point, I will open up for questions.
Do you prefer being called Frank or FT?
Those that know me best call me FT, but Frank, I started adopting Frank as a, it started in, I think at some point in middle school when one of my teachers just would refuse to call me FT. And he said, Frank's easier, it's one syllable. And then I started translating that into my professional career. And I think it just kind of stuck. So I preserve FT as a familiar name.
Okay. How about when you're dating?
When I'm dating, it just depends on the person.
Okay.
But I usually did Frank's easier to under. Frank's just easier. It's one syllable.
Jem kicked us off, and sorry, I was on transition from car to office at the beginning. I was hoping to introduce you, and so Jem, thank you for taking that. Jem, do you have any questions or thoughts hearing this very interesting story?
Then so far, I find it exciting because he traveled the world just with his backpacks, getting lost, like experiencing everything. Yeah, so I hope in this life I can also experience to travel around the world. Very adventurous, very brave.
Well, I guess like to that, I can say, I mean, I was scared beyond belief. Just as I mentioned, it took a lot of courage for me to completely stall out my professional career to be able to do this because I'm walking into the unknown and I'm going to places independently with very minimal guidance other than just figuring out where I'm going to stay and how I'm going to get there. Beyond that, I'm walking in blind, but just trusting that process that everything's going to be okay if you just break things up in little small bits. Like one of my coworkers from Fox told me that, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It's just one of those small little personal idioms that I just took things one day at a time. And the first thing I usually do is just go for a walk. As soon as I drop my stuff off, just go wander and start walking around and getting yourself familiar with your surroundings. And eventually you start stumbling into things that you wouldn't have thought about before. And the easiest thing to do is just to stop. Like the first thing you see, if something smells good to eat, go in, sit down, and find some way to communicate. And most of the time, it's just pantomiming. Say, like in India, where I can't speak any Hindi or Punjabi, I just muster the courage to just walk into the stall, point to what I want to eat, and do the little money sign, and using the largest bill that I have available, and just praying that they give me back the change exactly, which 9 times out of 10, that's true. And the hardest thing, one of the harder things about finding the courage to do this was admitting that, like, oh, do I have the money to be able to do this trip in the first place? And through doing that projection budget, when I showed from Budget My Trip, that's what gave me confidence, is seeing that it broke up these preconceived notions of how expensive a lot of these places really are. That Southeast Asia is a great starting point for most people because you can get a very good accommodation for 25 US dollars a night. But even for me, that was a little too rich. I was staying at hostels where, there's only, it's like a dormitory with 4 or 5 beds, staying there for $6 to $8 a night. So you can really stretch out a budget pretty quickly.
On that point, Jessica has a question. Jessica, did you want to ask that? Can you unmute yourself? Are you in a position to do that?
Yeah, I wanted to inquire. You just started talking about budget, but I had wrote in the chat, what was your budget for the entire trip? Because it's huge.
Okay, so I was using the litmus test of what my monthly living expenses in America would have been, and looking at my own expense reports back in Arizona, I was between rent, utilities, gas, food, I was spending just shy of 2,000 US dollars a month. So I thought, if I'm going to be unemployed, might as well travel the world instead of just sitting home and just letting that money go to waste. So I used like $2,000 a month as a benchmark, and say here. Like I would start budgeting myself of like, what would $2,000 broken down into about like $66 a day. And in my formula, in my sheets here, you see with Nepal, 20 days allotted. My budget became $1,400 for the 20 nights that I would be in Nepal.
Oh, great.
I ended up actually spending, like saving about 200 and some change, because I ended up spending about 1,146. Or say India, for the 41 nights I was there, my budget was 2,700. I ended up only having spent 1,000, like 1,700. So a savings of $1,000 and giving. Now, that budget ended up, in a lot of these places, the savings that I got ended up being offset in more expensive places. Say, for instance, Australia and New Zealand, probably the two most expensive places per capita, where Australia came out to be about, I was over budget by like $100, because I knew that I was going to be there for 52 nights. And New Zealand, this one was a little bit more. The reason this one wasn't filled out nearly as well is because whereas every other country I went to, I was living in actual accommodations, like with a roof over my head. I was, for a full month, I was living out of a camper van, driving around for about 6,000 kilometers, and I forget how many miles it is at this point. And I ended up spending more in New Zealand in 39 nights than I did in Australia for 52 nights. But in terms of the budget right now, it comes out, by my estimates, by the end of this trip, by the end of 15 and a half months, it'll be $29,000 to $30,000.
Oh, wow. I love how well organized it is. Do you have any regrets?
None that I can really think of. Like there were different iterations of how this trip was going to go after the 4 or 5 months. Like my initial thought was, if I was going to extend the trip, I would actually go through the Caucasus Mountain countries and then snake my way from Turkey to Portugal to get home in time for Christmas. But that got nixed because I found I didn't have any winter clothes. And a couple of my Armenian friends were telling me that right now, between Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Armenia, that because of the kind of the civil disputes or the wars that was going on, crossing by land or going to those countries would be a little tenuous, and so he advised me not to do that. Then that's when I decided to go through Europe. There was maybe a way for me to go to Pakistan between India and Sri Lanka, but once I found out I had to go to that wedding in Indonesia, that got nixed. But I have more years in my life to go off and travel and see these places. So I wouldn't say it's regret, because I think within the first month too, there was the sense that there's only so many things I can do on this trip. There's going to be things that I'm going to miss out on. Like when I was in Vietnam, most tourists or most backpackers and travelers, they do something called the Hai Giang Loop. It's where you rent a motorcycle and you do this 2 or 3 day trek up in the mountains, up on the border of China. And everyone tends to do that. But because I flew into Hanoi and I worked my way south by the railway to get into Cambodia, I missed out on doing that in the north. But then once I got to Nepal and I got to Laos, everything from all the pictures that I've seen of Hai Giang, they looked exactly the same. So in a sense, I really didn't miss out on much personally. So I became at peace with missing out on things.
Awesome. Of the 32 countries, what was your favorite?
Yeah, it's like asking you your favorite child. I love different countries for different reasons. I found India to be the most rewarding country I went to because it was the most intimidating. But once getting through it, it was the most rewarding. That I now say if I can get through India, I can get through any country. With Vietnam, what I loved most about that was getting a better sense of Southeast Asian history that is oddly omitted from America's curriculum. Like, because whereas in America, we call it, our war in Vietnam, the Vietnamese refer to it as the America's War of Aggression. And you really get more of the other side of how America operated in the country, from not just from what our parents' generation saw. Malaysia, okay. Being in Indonesia and being in Malaysia during Ramadan and finding my way to go into the national mosque of each of those places. Like, Indonesia is the 4th largest country in the world, and it is the most populated Muslim country in the world. And being there at the final days of Ramadan and going into Istiqlal Mosque, it is this beautiful, gorgeous metal mosque because they can't build it out of wood because it would rot in the jungle. And going in there during one of the prayer and fasting hours, and just out of curiosity, I sat down and started reading the Quran, even though it was completely written in Arabic. I used my live view of Google Translate to actually translate pages of the Quran and just see how, just kind of getting myself familiar with the tenets of Islam and seeing a lot of similarities between Christianity, at least in the way of its written nature. End up finding out that the way it's written is not too dissimilar. Going to Turkey as a Greek, I have to admit, much. It is utterly amazing, and seeing some of the ancient Greek ruins from Greek settlements in Anatolia, seeing that part of between Rumela and Anatolia, that gave me a better sense of heritage. Like, as I mentioned before with the Balkans, that I had a renewal of Christian faith that was kind of lost on me in the wake of my mother's passing, and I can now say that I've gotten my faith back. In Germany holds a special place in my heart because I got to be there during the Euro Cup, and one of my friends from back in Arizona, she happened to be there at the same time because she's an engineer on a work project, and we got to catch up. So I got to see friends abroad, even though I hadn't seen them in almost a year. My favorite food is probably coming from Indonesia. I can't explain why I love it. I just do.
So with the countries you visited and not being able to speak the language, which ones were the most friendly and welcoming, and which ones were the most hostile?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good question, Jackie. I wouldn't say hostile, but I would say currently Taiwan is probably the least English friendly place I've been to. Even in say Indonesia, India. Keeping in mind that at one point it was a British colony, and English is widely spoken in India. Even in rural places, you're going to get a couple of people that'll speak English. In Taiwan, not nearly as much. It took a lot more effort to be able to communicate with people, but they are friendly. Taiwanese people are still some of the most friendly people I've met. Probably the most hostile, the least
or like
friendly.
The least welcoming, at least.
Oh, as an American, Serbia, because I remember when I checked into my hostel and they saw on my passport that on the front there's an American flag that has a cover on it, and I noticed the mood change when they're checking me. They saw the American flag. They're like, "Oh, he's American," and I just got that instinct that I'm not going to be very welcome here. This could be a problem. But then it immediately changed when they saw my last name and they said, "Oh, are you Greek?" And I go, "Yeah, Greek ancestry, but yes." And they just flat out asked me if I was Orthodox Christian. And I said yes, and immediately go from straight face to they wanted to probably hit me to Greeks and Serbs, we get along so well. And they immediately change their tone from hostility to welcoming instantaneously. Like, oh yeah, the Greeks and the Serbs, the church, we are like this, we are friends. You are in non-AC room, I put you into AC room. And later the hostel owner ended up taking me out for drinks, and very, very insistently said, you are going to drink with me tonight. Like, you're going to do this. It's like, okay. As he was brandishing a gun. Because Serbia is the only country that has, in Europe, that I know that they have the same affinity for guns as Americans do. Another place that was the least welcoming. Through no fault of their own, I would say Amsterdam. But I don't think it's because of being an American. I think it's because it's my understanding that they have a disdain for tourists in general. So I wouldn't even chalk it up to any kind of anything other than they're just sick of tourists.
What would you say is the most exotic or unusual food that you had while you're overseas?
Eating rat in Cambodia. Farm rats. Now, these are not rats that you would say, these are not ones that you'd find out in the street. These are the ones like out in, say, Battambang, where it's very much a rural part of Cambodia. And these are rats that eat rice, grains out in the field. So they're treated more like rabbits or any other kind of edible rodents. And the analogy that I used for eating that rabbit, because most of the meat is on its hind legs, I had a snake with it at the same time, and I say the rat tasted better than the snake.
So when it comes to rat meat, would you say it's more similar to a red meat or more of a poultry like a chicken?
It's mostly like a chicken. And last night I had indigenous Taiwanese sausages, but they were made out of alligator meat. And funny enough, like alligators only exist between Taiwan, China, and the United States. The rest of the world has crocodiles. And other odd foods. I mean, in Thailand, eating crickets, eating fried up baby frogs, eating buffalo meat, which, I mean, it's not too dissimilar from beef and cows. Oh, but speaking on that, during this entire trip, I've not gotten food poisoning once. No proverbial deli belly, no upset stomachs, no me wishing to God and country that I was living, like praying to the porcelain god, as it were.
With countries
Except
like
one
India,
time.
oh, sorry.
I mean, I've eaten food with chopsticks, with regular fork and knife. In the Philippines, it's spoon and fork instead of no knife. And in India, using my hand to eat, and watching people make my meals with their bare hands, and I just eat it immediately. Because the key is, if you go to places where there's a lot of turnover and the food is kept warm, and they're like pulling it out of like soup containers and just throwing it onto your plate, odds are you're going to be fine, because if it's good enough for locals, it's good enough for you.
With places like
And
India
I'm a
where
certified eater. I'll eat anything.
right, so like places like India, for example, where just bacteria and everything's different from like say where you lived, Arizona. Did you drink the local water and did you have like issues with it, or did you stick to like bottled water?
Oh, no. Oh, no. Okay, some places water is better to drink than others. India, yeah, do not drink any of the tap water or anything of the sort. Just using good judgment, that, like, say in India and Sri Lanka, sticking to the bottled water is probably your better chance. And never get ice with your drinks, because odds are they're using that tap water to make the ice. So even if you think you're not drinking it, it's best not to. But then you have places like Australia, New Zealand, most places in Europe, the water's clean, so you'll be fine there.
of all the countries, who would you say has the best cuisine?
Oh, I mentioned Indonesian cuisine. I just found it to be probably my favorite because if I had to eat it every day for the rest of my life, I could. The one thing I have been missing on this trip is a lot of protein and meat. And so not only stopping my career and pumping money out of my bank account, I've also lost about 20 pounds of weight. Most of it's muscle. Like I started the trip at 190 pounds, and by the time I got to Nepal in late September, I clocked in at about 167 pounds.
Wow.
Now, most of it
I have a question for you. So what's your
for it.
single biggest surprise of this whole last 13 plus months?
Biggest surprise? I think as I came into this whole trip pretty open-minded, I don't think things surprised me terribly too much. I don't think I have a good answer for that. It's kind of hard to admit.
Is there one thing that really delighted you that you didn't expect?
Oh, what delighted me that I did not expect? Taiwan, I think is out of recency bias. I at the start of this trip, I had no idea I would be coming here to Taiwan. The reason I came here is I thought, well, on the way to Japan, Taiwan is between the Philippines, so maybe I might go and see that. Taiwan is probably one of the most underrated places to go to, where you don't see too many Western tourists here. Most of the Westerners that I've seen and interacted here are either engineers or expats because of the superconductor factories that one's being built in Phoenix and then the corresponding one here in Taiwan in Kaohsiung. So there's right now it's mostly engineer expats and people that are getting into Taiwanese financing, but you don't see too many casual tourists coming here, and that's probably a good thing because probably by the time that people see. And another surprise, I want to say Sri Lanka, because at the time I thought it was just a country in name only to myself. I didn't really have much knowledge of the country outside of a little bit of initial information of knowing that they went through a civil war in the 90s and they've had economic unrest that led to a coup. And life is strange on this, where growing up, one of my next door neighbors back in Columbus, Ohio, they were a Tamil Sri Lankan family that they had actually left Sri Lanka back in the 90s during the Civil War. And it became a lifelong friend. Sammy Giathiva is his name. And when I got into Sri Lanka, because we stayed in communication on social media, he said that he still had family in Kandy, which is in the middle of Sri Lanka. So by the time he connected me with his cousin, and he showed me around for 2 days and hosted me and took me out with his friends and showed me Sri Lanka on a much more personal level. And when you start meeting locals and not just sticking to tourist places, very few things will actually surprise you, because one of my main inspirations for traveling outside of what I mentioned was Anthony Bourdain. And whenever reading his book religiously, Kitchen Confidential, one of the main chapters that if I'm ever feeling like I can't go any further, maybe I'm getting exhausted, maybe I should stop this trip, I'll go into Audible and I'll put on the chapter Mission to Tokyo, which was Anthony's first trip outside of the outside of the United States as an adult, when he had to go open up his restaurant in Tokyo. And the way that he described seeing a place for the first time and just being utterly amazed with Tokyo. Every time I listen to that chapter, it reinvigorates me to travel and see new places, that there is wonder in some places. Drink the local alcohol, drink with locals, eat with locals, break bread with people, and you start getting people's lives and perspectives in a way that you never would have imagined. And you start finding out that really the differences between people are very small. Like, essentially, we're all the same. We want to do the best with what we have available. Family, friends, and yeah, just making the most of life and sharing laughs and helping people wherever you can. And it's been a wild ride. I can't find any other way to describe it other than I have no doubts that this was the best thing for me, because now I'm looking forward to the next steps. And for me, the next steps is in about 2 days, I'm flying out to Singapore to do the old tried and true knock on doors and see about finding a job for myself. And knowing that it's a long shot. And I thought, when is the next time in my life I'm going to be on this side of the world and I can take a risk on myself and try something that, even though the odds are stacked against me, at least I can say that I tried. Because I guess my dream is to be an expat, to spend a couple of years abroad. What say it could be any country, just living someplace for 2 years, and it could be India, it could be Singapore, it could be Japan, it can be anywhere. Just spending some time outside of the country and then coming back with a valiant return in America. I would say that's a pretty fulfilling life.
All right, Judy has a question, but before she does that, I have one question. What was your best date?
Best date. Probably the one that led to me getting actually, no, there's two. One that led me to go to staying in touch with a woman in Indonesia for me to go to that wedding. There's also a person that I met in India that was very friendly, very helpful to me, that once I got to Goa, she knew that I was kind of running low on available funds because I had to shift some things around. She let me stay at her apartment in Goa for free. She said, just you having a good time, like you're a good person. And it made me feel better about myself. And take care, stay here, you'll be fine. Just enjoy India. And also a meeting on the first leg of the trip in the Philippines, meeting a woman that you end up finding out to have a very good connection with, staying in touch over the full year. So after New Zealand, coming back to the Philippines and reconnecting and catching up and conversing with her. She's one of the people. Her name is Jen Rojas. And through talking through things of, now that the formal trip is over, what am I going to do with my life? She just told me to listen to my gut, and she helped get me over the edge of pushing me to do Singapore. Because she asked me the question that I already knew the answer. And it's amazing that you meet people in different countries and you find out that there's hope for me yet in that department. So it can't be just one date that was really great. There's been many, because I've learned something from every person that I've seen.
Judy says you've already answered her question.
Yep. And hi, FT.
Hey. So any other questions?
I'm from
Hi, FT, it's Rosemary. I have a comment. You did great. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so happy that you are safe. That was my biggest worry, even though you apparently didn't have that worry. I did, but well done, you. And just to take on this is, as you said, it's going to be rewarding for your entire life. My question had more to do with tactical and customs, and you brought up a little bit about your reception in the different countries. Did you have any issues getting through customs, or did they question you? You went so many places.
You know what? No, surprisingly, I've spent no more than 15 minutes going through customs in every country. It's a lot simpler. Things are so much more streamlined now that it's nothing out of the usual. There's only one time that I did get pulled aside and got interrogated, but it was for a good reason, because when I came from Cambodia to Thailand by bus. I stayed one night in Bangkok because I knew that the way I planned it, it was easier for me to fly out of Bangkok to get up to Laos. So when I went through the border customs of Thailand the first day, and then 24 hours later, I'm going to the airport and trying to fly out. They pulled me in an interrogation, asking me like, why were you in Thailand for one day? They must have assumed I was only there for maybe, they had said, well, people do this because they're either trafficking drugs or they're trafficking people. And I point to my backpack and go, you think I can fit a person in this backpack?
One piece at a time.
Yeah. And I just said, no, I explained my logistics, and they explained why I had to get pulled over. But I didn't really fear for my life. The only time I really feared for my life was probably in Serbia, as I mentioned, because they were brandishing guns at a bar and everyone was getting completely inebriated. So I thought maybe that's a place, if it all were to end here, okay. I almost kind of accepted that fate, but obviously nothing happened.
Well, excellent.
But to end it on a good note, is there is no place where I really felt like I was truly unsafe, because you're always going to find people that are going to look after you, because ultimately people want to help others. They just need an opportunity to do it. And as long as you are friendly, caring, and considerate, and just mind your business, you're going to get friendly receptions wherever you go.
I agree.
Great way to end it. Very positive.
And my number one piece of advice for everyone listening is, if you ever feel like doing something, it doesn't have to be as drastic as what I'm doing, but it can even be just take a full month off or doing something. Ask yourself in the back of your head, when is the next time in my life I'll be able to do this? Or better yet, just do it. Just begin. Like if you have writer's block, they say just keep writing aimlessly. You'll find your voice again. And for me, when I had to push the button and say that I wanted to do this trip, I remember calling my stepbrother Ryan, and I asked him like, "I'm going to be okay, right?" He goes, "Yeah, you'll be okay." Hit send, and I bought the ticket. I just needed someone just to kind of say something else, say what I already knew inside, and just confirm my instincts. Because odds are you want to listen to your instincts. We just tend to get in our own way.
The last few books I've read have been by Ray Dalio and John Maxwell, and both of them multiple times talk about that people's lives, they don't regret failing. It's always they regret not doing something that they wanted to do. You did it. So congratulations on that. Jem, do you have any final comments that you'd like to make?
So far none. Very inspiring and very encouraging to go to trip, to travel and experience while we're young and free. So yeah, and thank you for this Globinar, from very life changing for me as a young woman who is traveling Philippines to Singapore and looking forward to travel also around the Asia. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the inspiration, Frank. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.